Welcome back. Even though nearly 21 million Americans are collecting unemployment benefits as we speak, and up to 50 million people having trouble putting food on the table, Congress, they can't manage to pass a stimulus bill that would help people make ends meet. In just the past week, nearly 900,000 people filed for unemployment benefits for the first time. And if lawmakers in D.C. can't get their act together and cut a deal by the end of the week, 12 million Americans could hit what's called a benefits cliff. That's where they're going to lose their jobless benefits by the day after Christmas. A $900 billion bipartisan package is on the table. It includes direct payments to people, aid for small businesses, expanded jobless benefits, and more. But it is far from a done deal. Both sides squabbling over stimulus, but there's also dissension within Democratic ranks. Take a listen to what Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had to say.
Well, I do think that we need new leadership in the Democratic Party. The internal dynamics of the House has made it such that there's very little option for succession, if you will. Whenever there's a challenge, it kind of collapses. And that is, I think, the result of just many years of power being concentrated in leadership with a lack of, real grooming of a next generation of leadership.
So AOC going right after the folks on your screen right there, just as Schumer and Pelosi try to get ready for a new administration. Certainly not talking party unity at the moment. My next guest, he just wrote a piece for Rolling Stone discussing that very thing. The title, Trump's Gone, so what's next for the Democrats? Matt Taibbi, contributing editor for Rolling Stone. He's also with TK News. And Matt, and I'll get to the party dynamics in a second, but this stimulus package, and I know given the reality of the math of Washington right now with a split Congress and a very thin margin for Democrats in the House, do you think they gave up too much leverage? Some say this is the best deal they possibly could get with an intractable McConnell, but nobody thinks that I speak to say that the numbers are going to be enough given the deep economic problems so many millions of Americans are facing.
So I did a story earlier this week where I got a call from a senior congressional aide on the Democratic side who was extremely frustrated, said it was the worst piece of negotiating that he'd ever seen. And essentially there's a lot of discontent over the what people feel are missed opportunities to have made a deal previously, specifically after Donald Trump and Steve Mnuchin, when they were politically desperate in October and they offered a $1.8 trillion deal. The Democrats rejected that on the grounds that $300 billion for state and localities was not enough. And the current deal only gives $160 billion, and there's a strong chance they won't even get that. So there's a strong sense that they turned down a better deal multiple times over the course of the pre-election period.
And you mentioned it. Governors are freaking out, Matt, as you know, as to where is the state aid in this, and this idea that all of a sudden we'll have a kumbaya moment, after January 20, and the aid's just going to come flowing to the states. A lot of them don't see it, and the cuts, the draconian cuts that states would have to make, or raising taxes in the middle of a pandemic, it is brutal. So what hope are you hearing behind the scenes that state aid package will be real in terms of scope or even practical given McConnell's record?
So I'm actually hearing the opposite, that if anything, it would get worse. They specifically designed this bipartisan deal to be two separate bills. It's a $748 billion package and then a $160 billion package. And the $160 billion package has the stuff that both sides don't want. It has the corporate liability portion that the Republicans don't want, and it has the state and local aid that the Republicans don't want. I'm sorry, that the Democrats don't want the first one. As a result, there's a feeling, and Steny Hoyer and Dick Durbin already signaled that they were willing to support this idea, that the larger bill might get passed and the smaller one might not be passed. It, in fact, might be sacrificed so that they could add something else like direct payments. So if you're a governor and you're waiting for that federal aid, it's very possible that you're going to end up being left hanging in the balance here.
strip morality out of this, Matt, I don't get the McConnell play here in that the easiest thing to do in Washington is to spend money. And since when, really, especially in the Trump years? I mean, we were looking at $1 trillion annual projected deficit before we even heard COVID-19. So why the new religion for pay-go all of a sudden? McConnell could lose the 2 Senate seats in Georgia, and privately at least, he's been saying to folks that they're getting killed down there, Loeffler and Perdue, because of the state aid question and also the stimulus package. Why not just write a mega check here politically? You know, you got Republican governors that are going to be hurting too. It's not just a blue state problem. Why not? What's McConnell's objection to this? And don't give me morality. That's never been part of the equation.
I have no idea. I mean, I think there are members of the Republican caucus like Josh Hawley who clearly see this as an opportunity. They think that the Democrats have given them room to do exactly what you're saying and say, hey, let's open our checkbooks a little bit and help ordinary working people, right? That's a phrase that for the first time in my lifetime I can remember hearing Republicans talk about. But McConnell seems determined to make sure that that the package is as small as possible when it comes to certain kinds of aid. Obviously, it's a blank check when it comes to supporting the financial markets with the bond buying programs and all that. But when it comes to direct aid to people and unemployment insurance and that sort of thing, for some reason they still think it's politically advantageous to make that bill small. And I'm not sure what the upside is, frankly. I can't answer that for you.
And then you get to the internal Democratic, more than debate, a division right now. Help the audience out with the math. Obviously, we had the losses for Democrats in the House in this most recent election, plus Biden picked off 2 members to join his cabinet right now. You have a small margin, and if you look at it as a block, the progressive block with AOC and Squad, theoretically, if they wanted to be like an IDC for those folks in New York who remember that, or even the Freedom Caucus that the Republicans had to navigate a few years back, they could hold things up. Now, I don't think they're going to, but how much problem will Pelosi have in her hands here, where the majority of freshmen 2 years ago ran moderate campaigns that flipped red seats, and the Progressive Caucus, who is not happy that the party is not going nearly left enough? How much of a headache does she have in her hands?
I think it's going to be significant. The party has already sent some pretty strong signals that it doesn't intend to really make the sort of left progressive wing of the party part of the decision-making process. The first thing was bringing Neera Tanden in as the OMB director, or nominating her, and that was seen by many as a sort of a direct insult to the Sanders voters. But then also with this deal, the people they put in charge of negotiating this bipartisan COVID deal were Mark Warner and Joe Manchin, who are really the most conservative members of the caucus, and probably the most ardent enthusiasts for something more like an austerity approach to budgetary issues, which is the opposite of what the AOCs of the world are hoping for. So that's a pretty strong signal that Pelosi and Schumer are leaning in a certain direction when it comes to deals like this. Obviously, before the election, they were talking very differently on this issue, but now they've suddenly discovered budgetary restraint, and that seems to be what they're going to go with.
Matt Taibbi, always appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
We come back, everyone. I'm going to try and lighten things up a little bit and talk some sports. There is some good news regarding the Super Bowl, but bad news for college sports. I'll explain after the break.